Stephanie, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure being here with you guys. I really like this forum. When Stephanie and I first talked about us being here, with the ability to really engage with you one-on-one, right? I'm not a big believer in booths and handouts and flyers and such. Perhaps selfishly, you'll notice I'm not a sales guy up here. I'm a product guy, and that's important for me as I build out my product roadmap here at Sprint to understand what's on top of mind for you guys. What are the challenges that you're seeing both with funding, with implementations of solutions, with management of those solutions moving forward, and actually incorporating that, listening to your feedback and building our product roadmap because of it. So I'll spend a little bit of time with you here today talking about, when we talk about smart cities, what actually becomes smarter? Is it the city itself, or is it the people that live in those cities? My background personally, prior to Sprint, I spent about 10 years in consulting, IoT across the board, Fortune 100 companies, helping them understand how to leverage this power of IoT. Now, you would have noticed, perhaps conspicuously, one of the buzzwords missing from Stephanie's slides was IoT, because we don't maybe consider that a buzzword anymore, right? Everyone's considered the fact that it was a perfect storm, this coming together of the cost of connectivity going down, the cost of compute going down, and the cost of storage with the introduction of Amazon and Azure and these clouds, that really allowed connecting things that we didn't think were possible or feasible to connect in the past, right? So we had this huge insurgence of just connect everything that you can connect. I read a statistic the other day that 90% of the world's data was generated within the last year. 90% within the last year. Only 1% of that data is actually usable or beneficial. Seems like an utter waste of connecting everything just because it became cheaper to do so, right? So at Sprint, we believe you shouldn't just stop at capturing the data. You really need to be able to turn that data into immediate intelligence. And we see the world's moving this way as we talk about things like autonomous vehicles, robotics. You don't have the opportunity to take that 90%, leave it in data centers, and maybe one day figure out what you're going to do with it. What you really want is the intelligence. But why stop there? We actually believe the IoT's got power to change lives if you do it properly, right? And perhaps my proudest moment in being in technology in this industry was a lot of us fly. I know I'm constantly on the road. And I was talking to somebody sitting next to me on the plane about what I did. And I usually kind of cringe when I have to answer that question. Like, I'm in IoT, and yeah, everybody in this room might know what it means, but explaining it to other people always seems a bit challenging. So I was talking to this nice lady sitting next to me. Who was like, yeah, I'm in the world of connected devices, and think about everything that's connected except for your smartphone. And she goes, that's really interesting because my son has diabetes, and we just got him an insulin pump that allows me to actually know how he's doing. And I can look at it from my phone. And it gives me peace of mind when I'm on the road and I can't see to see how his levels have been, how his intakes have been. And she was like, I want to say thank you because it's people like you that made that possible for me. And I don't think I've ever felt as good about what I do as I did in that moment, because I saw somebody's life that was positively impacted by the Internet of Things. Many of you recognize this face. Masayoshis has been a visionary and leader, one of the chairmen of the board for Sprint and the CEO of SoftBank. This guy's got a vision unlike anybody else I've spoken to or heard about in the future. Right? We in product, I'm lucky if I have a 1 or 2 or a 5-year roadmap. This guy's got a 300-year vision of how society is going to evolve, right? Hard to even fathom to an extent. But this quote really stuck with me, and that was the boom rate at which we analyze and collect and glean knowledge from the information that we're seeing in the IoT, connectivity of everything, is a little bit like the Cambrian explosion, right? This was when, through evolution, organisms actually developed the ability to sense, to see, touch, hear. And that's how we evolved as a planet. Now, that took 55 million years for us to be where we are as an intelligent species today. Sometimes it feels like that's how long it takes me to get through my emails as well, but long time. Now, if you look at businesses, however, and technology, it's evolved a lot faster than that, hasn't it? I mean, the internet didn't exist 30 years ago in the way that we think about it today. Imagine that, right? I still sometimes hear my AOL dial-up connection starting up, and that wasn't that long ago. Most of you have a smartphone in your hand today. That smartphone has more compute power than the first space shuttle that went to the moon. That's insane. It didn't take 55 million years, right? And what happens to the right side of that graph? How's the future going to get shaped? And that's what's really exciting about this journey and being in IoT and working with leaders like you in your respective spaces to understand how do we shape, how do we control that future? You don't want to let it happen to you. You want to be part of that change. You want to be part of that influence. And in many ways, that future is here now. You always hear the question, who's smarter, man or machine? People would argue man is, right? We still control the machines. But when was the last time that you ran a pivot table in your head? Probably a little bit harder to do. So on the left side, you'll see here, I mean, the human brain's extremely efficient, very smart, right? Sometimes, in fact, today, I made it through most of my day on a bag of pretzels and espresso from this morning. Very little power consumption, continues to process, it's light, it's agile, and the best part is I can take it with me. Hopefully all you brought your brains with you to Austin this trip around. But if you look at machines and the compute power that we've been able to achieve, in many ways, these data centers are more powerful than we are. They are smarter than we are. The problem is that they're confined to a space. They require a lot of power. They require a lot of resources, like cooling. And they're very efficient. They're very fast, but they're immobile. We can't take them with us. Stephanie mentioned 5G, and she was at 5G Americas last week. This is the bridge in between what we call human intelligence and all of that intelligence sitting in a data center. On the left side, you'll see here our typical reaction times as human beings compared to that of technology, right? So when you hear something, in fact, your sight is your personal equivalent of edge compute. It's wired directly into your brain, so you see things faster than you'll do anything else. Hearing, touch, all of these things have very quick reaction times for us as humans. Now, when technology looks at this and robots look at it, today's LTE networks still require some time between that something being sensed in that endpoint versus being computed in that data center and being returned as intelligence. But 5G will really allow us to take all of that compute power that sits inside those data centers, all of that data that needs to be turned into intelligence and the applications that will power the cities of the future, the vehicles of the future, the mobility of the future, and make them almost instantaneous. And that's a really powerful thought. This is the first time that a cellular technology, right, because we don't always have Wi-Fi, we don't always have connectivity, but when we look at things like autonomous vehicles and robotics and artificial intelligence, 5G really is that missing piece that brings it together. Now, coming back to smart cities, of course, the case is very obvious for smart cities, right? 87% of the populations live in cities, in or around cities. Even in rural areas, the case is pretty strong. Cost savings from energy management. I think I saw this in Bloomberg yesterday. I mean, think not related to cities, but Walmart is saving $200 million a year just by changing their light bulbs to LEDs. That's $200 million a year just by changing their light bulbs to LEDs. There was another $20 million from changing their floor wax, which wasn't as sexy, but hey, still savings, right? Traffic congestion, pollution, returns from transport connectivity, so allowing people the tools that they need to live and succeed in these cities. So many use cases that Stephanie referred to, I think, make absolute sense in the context of a city, but we've kind of been at this for a while, haven't we? And the concept of a smart city isn't new. It was come up 2 decades ago, smaller pieces, bits and pieces. Maybe the connectivity and the sensors weren't there, but we've been really grappling with this concept of smart cities for quite some time. I'm going to just use some fun examples here, because I want to make sure you guys, I'm standing probably between you and some cocktails for the evening at some point. But the first traffic light was an example of sort of a smart city, right? But to this day, I mean, there's intersections that I sit at for like 7 minutes. I'm like, how haven't you figured out that there's no traffic coming in either direction, and I'm still sitting here? But that was really the origin of this is, okay, we've got a problem. Our problem is congestion. Let's put a piece of technology in, and let's hope it solves it. But it's not always that simple. Maybe a more fun one. Let's get, who's seen The Wizard of Oz here? It's been a while. But the Emerald City was this quintessential place that the citizens were happy, everything was green, the wizard could change shape and take form and see its people and adapt to it, right? We had this concept of this perfect place to live 70 years ago. And then again 40 years ago, right, with the Jetsons, living in the sky, in a city that adapted to climate, and you could live above the rain, and there was no pollution. And the one invention that I probably wish I had from the Jetsons was the thing that got you ready in the morning, like brushed your teeth and put your clothes on for you. I could use that when I'm on a 6 a.m. conference call on the West Coast. It would definitely be helpful. But none of it's really materialized in the way that we would want it to, and that is because technology tends to be difficult. That is because, especially in a city, things are incredibly hard. I like to think of perhaps my home as the smallest unit of my city, right? That's my personal city. When I go home, it's, I might hit traffic with the dogs that are standing in the way. I might have to interact with the services. I might have to go to the kitchen and eat dinner. So being a little bit of a tech geek a few years ago when all of these connectivity things were happening, I was like, yeah, connected light bulbs, right? Connected garage, connected door opener. And I got really excited, and I went to Best Buy, and I picked up some light bulbs, and I showed my family. I'm like, look, I can hit a button on my app and turn on the light. That was really cool. And then I was sitting there watching TV one day, and I was like, all right, well, lights are too bright. Let me turn off the lights. Oh, man, where's my phone? I had to look for my phone first, right? And I had to unlock my phone, find an app. Then I had to turn on that app, find a button, and then hit that button. I was like, man, I could have just stood up and hit that switch. It probably would have been a little bit faster, right? Same thing with other stuff. As I started to connect pieces of my home might have become smarter, but I didn't become any smarter because of it. So I sat down and I really thought about, well, what do I need? How would my home help me? Okay, so if I'm watching a movie, it would be nice if my lights dimmed themselves, right? So could I integrate my remote control into it? A big one for me is if I'm walking down the hallway to get a glass of water in the middle of the night and there's toys out on the floor, I stub my toe 1,000 times. If I had a motion sensor between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., the lights would turn on, knowing that it was dark already and I was moving through the house. So I actually sat down and thought about what my schedule and my routine is like and how I could be smarter as a result of that home. And that's what really made it a smart home for me. So now when I pull up into my garage, the lights do turn on because I have a GPS location finder and my mobile application for my phone, so my lights turn on if it's dark outside. My door, fortunately, doesn't unlock on its own because they haven't messed the security up that badly yet. But when I walk in, it adapts to me as I move through the house. The lights turn off and on. My Wi-Fi is optimized. It really is a experience that I feel happy with, and it's not obtrusive in the way that I've got to work my phone out and play with it to make it useful for myself. And I brought that up is because sometimes we lose sight of what is the outcome that we're really trying to drive. We get so infatuated with implementing the newest technology or trying to repurpose technology that we've invested in that we lose sight of the outcomes that we're trying to drive. And many times we end up leaving money on the table in the way that we implement these solutions. So although $100 billion with a B will be spent on smart cities over the next 5 years, almost a third of those projects won't get implemented. Either too complex, not scalable, not defined well enough. Stephanie mentioned ROI. Sometimes those things are very difficult to measure, and ROI could absolutely be citizen happiness. It could absolutely be pure efficiency. 4 out of 5 of those projects won't achieve scale because they were meant to be quick wins, right? Okay, let me spend a little bit of money, let me show some value, make the case for it, and when I get there, hopefully I'll be able to scale it. When you go back and redesign it for scale, you lose sight of what it is that you proved out in the first place. then 2 out of 3 of those will focus on improving city services alone, which in certain cases will be helpful, but if your citizens aren't smarter because of it, in the same way that I wasn't smarter by turning my lights on through an application, it's not necessarily going to help. So how do we try and be mindful of this conundrum in trying to get ourselves smarter, our cities, our citizens smarter, each of our departments for you guys smarter, sharing that knowledge across? How do we do that? And that's really is what I like to, my spin on IoT as an acronym. I call it the Internet of Thinking rather than the Internet of Things. Start thinking about how you apply technology. What outcomes do you want to drive? But also be mindful that sometimes there is a cost-benefit mismatch. The people that are paying for this technology aren't the ones that receive benefit from it, right? This is a challenge outside of the smart city space. Whenever I go and talk to technology departments at Fortune 100 companies, I'm usually talking to a CTO, right? He's the one, okay, yeah, I've got some technology dollars. How do I make this? My CEO's pressuring me. I got to get ahead of this IoT thing. Tell me what I should do, where I should invest. And I'm thinking, that guy sitting across the hall from you that's got 100 trucks that are out on the road, and his life is more difficult when 5 of those trucks break down and he can't tell his people where they need to go, he's the one that's going to see benefit from this. But you're the one paying for it, right? So the person that's really looking at what outcomes do I receive, who's going to measure success in that sense? The business, or in your case, sometimes the citizens, the people that are seeing the benefit from it aren't the ones that are always paying for it. And it's important to recognize that there may be a cost-benefit mismatch in some of the projects that you take on. Technology is still difficult, right? I was sort of half dreading having to come up here and connect my laptop for this presentation because chances are it probably wouldn't have worked, right? Dialing into a conference call is tough enough, let alone getting technology to work seamlessly across a city, something as large as a city. My home was complex enough, and that's only 2,000 square feet, right? Technology is still difficult, and we still focus more on teaching people to use technology, whereas we should be more focused on teaching technology to work with people. And we will get there. We will get there, but at the moment, it's important to recognize. In fact, I think just on the way over here at the airport, 1,000 digital signage applications, right? There's so many digital signs. There's the airline signs, the restaurant signs. And I'm walking down the elevator, I see one of those blue screens of death that all of us hate seeing on our laptop on one of those digital signs, right? You would think it wouldn't happen, but it does, because technology is still difficult. And generally, people are happy, especially in the context of the cities that we live in, the services that all of you provide. People aren't miserable to where they think, I need some sort of improvement, right? We've fortunately live in a country where we have clean water most places. We've got public transportation. We've got resources that we can go to. So people don't think, how can I fundamentally change my life through technology? And it's important to keep that in mind, right? How do you get those little wins? How do you get that person that's waiting at the bus stop when it's 30 degrees outside and it's snowing to know where that bus is, how long it's going to take to get there? How do you understand the pain points of your particular cities, what happens inside of them, and how do you make those people just a little bit happier through what you're doing in IoT? We at Sprint recognize the IoT that we knew in the past, right? We've been in the connectivity space for about 100 years. For those that don't know our background, we started off in the wireline business, are still there, started off, transitioned into wireless. We have been in the IoT space for the better part of a decade. But through the leadership changes, through the investment of SoftBank inside of Sprint, and through, many of you may have heard of the Vision Fund, one of the largest venture capital funds in the world at the moment, $100 billion fund, maybe announcing a second $100 billion fund coming up. We took a step back and said, if we're going to do this properly, we've got 5G coming up, we've got this thing called IoT, we've got this other buzzword called artificial intelligence. Are we going to continue to be a carrier that sells connectivity? Or are we really going to rethink what our role in this marketplace continues to be? And in doing that, we decided we needed to take 4 steps to be a relevant player in this evolving space. And that was really rethinking how and why IoT traffic is managed certain ways. And without getting too technical with you guys, we understood that it couldn't continue to be on the same network as the rest of our cellular devices today, right? It works when you've got a trailer tracker moving down the highway and you need to know where it is 3 times a day. It's very different when you've got a school bus with your kid on it that's driving itself down the highway, right? You will think about that data very differently. Securing and managing those devices, these millions and billions and trillions, every catalog or magazine you read will have a different billion number on how many IoT devices will be connected. But being able to securely manage those devices, whether they're on cellular, low power wide area networks, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, you name it, you need to be able to see them, manage them, get that data, turn it into intelligence seamlessly. Third, we realized that engaging with the small, medium business community, the developer community that really come up with these solutions is important. We actually launched in May our digital factory, which is finished solutions that are very easy to deploy. We've got IoT in a box solutions that target vertical industry problems. So if you're a deli owner, right? I was a small business owner for several years of my life. The last thing that I wanted was to procure technology. But I was happy to procure outcomes, right? So for a deli owner whose careless 16-year-old sandwich maker left the fridge open the night before, they came in the next day to find $800 worth of deli meat gone. That was the difference in between that business being profitable that week and not being profitable that week. So if I can help that problem to be solved, I don't sell that customer technology, I sell them outcomes, and that's where the factory is focused. And then lastly, we wanted to build differentiated, unique solutions that we bring to market built around the SoftBank family. And why is that important? Because these are the people that are pushing the envelope, digitally native companies, Uber being an investment company, CloudMinds being an investment company, CloudMinds with Boston Robotics. I mean, it's just that portfolio that's shaping that 300-year vision from Masa that I talked about, are working with Sprint to help us build our IoT network of the future. And likewise, we're building services with them and for them that help both of us accelerate. What we announced just a month ago, I feel like I might lose track of my week, sometime in September at Mobile World Congress, was this concept of Sprint Curiosity. It's the name of our IoT platform. And why the name? Why curiosity? Because that is really what drives us inherently as human beings in improving the way we do things, right? For those of you who have kids, you always, it's as the adage goes, you might know that the pot is boiling, but you still touch it. You get burned, and then you realize you shouldn't touch a hot pot anymore, right? That curiosity is what really fuels all of us to do anything, and it's the beginnings of the way that we're building our IoT platform to serve these services moving forward. And it's not just about 5G. 5G being, provides us the local loop, meaning between my device or my endpoint and that cellular tower, I have very low latency, I have a lot of high-speed bandwidth. But what happens after that point, right? When an autonomous vehicle generates about 3 terabytes of data per hour, you're not going to have the ability to send all of that data back to a data center for processing and turn it into intelligence. So you need it to be within the proximity. You need to solve for physics, right? So the endpoint from where that data is generated to where that application is processed requires it to be within a certain distance of that endpoint. Additionally, you need the core that directs this traffic to be dedicated for IoT, because those applications are going to continue to be data intensive, can't ride on the same network as your consumer network, and that alleviates that third problem at the bottom there, which is providing 0 delays in processing time. So understanding that the world was shifting this way, that 5G fits one part of the puzzle, Curiosity was designed with 2 pieces, and that's our Curiosity core and the Curiosity operating system. The core itself is what is dedicated for IoT and manages the traffic that's being generated by these devices. The operating system is what allows us to centrally aggregate, filter the data, sequence the data, turn that data into intelligence immediately. Now, don't make anything of the colors at the top of the screen. They don't mean anything at all. But this is what we're looking at when you think about the way that we're building out that core network, right? The radio access network, of course, is there, but the actual endpoints, we talked a little bit about data centers earlier, right? The way that we're building this network out, we don't need for our instance of the core to be inside of a Sprint data center. We can put it inside of a customer data center. We can put it co-located inside of a city data center. We are truly rethinking, as a software company would, and not as a carrier would, about the way that we're building our IoT network out. Without getting too technical here, even for me, I'm not a technical guy, but I'll try and explain the gist of this for you guys. Traditionally, when that endpoint connects to a tower, that tower then transfers it to a physical line, goes through an internet service provider, across the internet, and then onto an application or a data center that actually processes that data in that application. We are transversing a lot of that and removing cost from the way that the network's designed, all the way to running parts of that core on bare metal infrastructure inside of our customer sites, and again, distributed across the US, which allows us in that mission of turning data into intelligence quickly. That operating system, perhaps I've had arguments with my leadership on this name as well, because I had analysts reach out to me afterwards and ask whether it was backwards compatible with Linux. It made me cringe a little bit. It's not an actual operating system. Think of it as an IoT platform, which many of you are probably familiar with, those that raised their hands and said that we are investing in IoT projects. It allows us to rethink the way we collect that data, where that data is processed. We heard one buzzword that was still on that slide was edge, right? How do you keep that data from sitting, 90% of that data from just sitting in data stores and warehouses? How do you get the data that you need? How do you get the intelligence that you need? Keep it, react to it, and turn it into intelligence immediately. This is the holy grail, right? It's not just about IoT. It's not just about 5G. It's really the coming together of these sensors, how that data is processed, and the artificial intelligence to turn that data into meaningful thoughts for our citizens, for ourselves, for our companies. And this is the part that we are thinking about. I'm going to show you one quick example of something that we did for New York City, along with some of our partners that help you understand the vision that we're portraying here.
New York City has committed to reducing congestion and pollution, including lowering CO2 emissions by 40% by 2030. To achieve this, we need to increase the use of electric vehicles, but large-scale change means rethinking how we charge those EVs. Taking turns parked at a fixed charging station is just not efficient. So, what's the solution? How about robotic EV chargers that move autonomously from vehicle to vehicle, charging them according to the power needs of each? Adaptive Motion Group, FreeWire, and Sprint have partnered to create the autonomous Mobi, an intelligent robot charger that comes to you. The autonomous Mobi is the first robot to use a combination of self-driving artificial intelligence and 5G-enabled IoT from Sprint. Mobi can plug into AC or charge at a base station that includes LG's most advanced solar panels and batteries for generation and storage. Power is transferred to the Mobi through an inductive charging pad. Using AMG AI software, the Mobi can avoid collisions and obstacles, moving easily around people, objects, and other vehicles. This autonomous mobility increases charging efficiency by 10-fold. At the heart of this concept is 5G-enabled IoT, combining Sprint connectivity with weightless micro-positioning. Weightless micro-positioning is much more accurate than GPS and works in parking structures and urban canyons where GPS can be inaccurate. Sprint has the 5G spectrum resources required to support the capacity and density needed. Within just 5 years, this micro-positioning can be deployed in all 5 boroughs, enabling the Mobi and an increasing number of vehicles to be electric, connected, and autonomous. The union of our enhanced GPS, together with low-latency Sprint 5G, enables connected vehicle applications to reduce congestion by 40%. And provide better emergency response, public safety, paratransit, and ride-sharing. Multiple companies are working together to deploy a citywide ecosystem. HNTB uses it for smart mobility in airports. United Rentals carries the technology into construction sites. FSG installs the IoT modules into existing lights, and our automotive partners can add it to any vehicle. A cleaner, healthier New York City starts with unlocking the potential of electric vehicles and builds to a system-level approach to accelerate progress for New York's goal of reducing emissions 80% by 2050.
I'm personally proud of that. I think it helps us understand how these things, how AI, 5G, and IoT come together to truly drive outcomes and a problem inside of a city. Our mission, our ethos at Sprint, especially within the IoT team, going back to where I started, is improving how people live, how businesses operate, and how society evolves to be better from technology. Thank you for your time.